what is USAID? We have the full hour, Mike. You have so much to say about this. I'm not going to interrupt you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, USAID is probably the dirtiest standalone institution in the American government because it's allowed to be and because it's the ideal place to creatively structure the absolute worst kinds of activities that you could not get away with directly either at the State Department, the Defense Department, or the CIA. And so let's just talk about what USAID is supposed to do. So USAID is supposed to be a humanitarian NGO sponsor that makes the world a better place, but in the process advances U.S. foreign policy. So American foreign policy, you can think of that as management of the American empire, right? We have an American homeland where we live, and we have an American empire, which is where we have our import-export markets. It's where we extract critical natural resources. It's the basis of our national security and where we put our military bases. It is what makes the American homeland rich, is that we have a huge amount of influence over the course of internal events that happen throughout the rest of the world. And that is made possible, in large part, by USAID. That is what USAID is supposed to do. Basically, make us richer, make us more safe, make us have more control over the affairs in foreign countries, but at the same time, be a plucky group of cherubic warriors who are making the world a better place along the way. That's sort of the idea behind it. But just to make that clear, there's no aid in USAID. That's the aid that you see visually with your eyes there is designed to fool you. It's the Agency for International Development, not aid. And international development is development of institutions, development of assets. The money goes to groups, not to people. These are not, it doesn't go directly to the people that a grant will say that it serves. It goes to the groups administering it, which allows USAID to be the way to capacity build assets that the CIA or the State Department or the Defense Department want to pump up in order to carry out activity in a region. Now, the reason that I've been on a crusade for the past year and a half, 2 years, saying that the USAID is worse than the CIA is because USAID can operate like the CIA, but without the restraints that are typically put on the CIA. So from the 1940s until the 1970s, the CIA was a totally rogue agency in the same way that USAID currently is. It was not until the scandals of the 1960s and the 1970s, primarily against Democrats in this country, for example, Operation Mockingbird, Operation Chaos. There was also the COINTELPRO side of FBI, Operation Midnight Climax, and all of these, the CIA infiltrating left-wing student groups on college campuses, co-opting left-wing thought leaders and poets and artists and musicians. When all of this stuff broke in the 1960s and 70s, the CIA was forced to undergo a series of reforms. Chief among them was the requirement of a presidential finding wherein any covert action the CIA does has to be formally authorized by the US president. Well, what happens if a rogue cell at the CIA wants to do something so dirty that the president would never approve of it? Well, then they can't get a presidential finding for it, and they can't do it. Or what if the CIA wants to run an operation that actually targets the president himself? The president would obviously never sign off for that. Well, welcome to the wild world of USAID, because what they can do is they can walk over to their partners at USAID and have USAID simply creatively structure the necessary parts to carry out what the CIA would have wanted to structure it as, but USAID can simply structure it as humanitarian work. For example, let's just say that the CIA wanted to fund ISIS terrorists to topple the government of Syria. And President Trump did not want to give money to ISIS. Well, so the CIA would not be able to get a presidential finding, would not be able to get Trump to sign off on that covert action. If they wanted to do it anyway, they could simply have an informal conversation with USAID, and USAID could simply structure its humanitarian work in the region to funnel money to ISIS-K or funnel money to the Taliban. They could put, for example, military supplies, as they've gotten caught busted doing, in medical vans or in USAID public health facilities. They could through a Byzantine layer of wire payments end up funneling the money to terrorist groups, because USAID, amazingly, and credit John Solomon's Just the News for breaking this week, the OIG at USAID just this week revealed that USAID actually does not require its contractors to go through the OFAC and anti-terrorism vetting requirements, which means that USAID contractors can freely give money to designated terrorist groups. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say here is
this is shocking stuff. I mean, so we have about 2 minutes here. It sounds as if this is a slush fund and an ATM machine for all the deep state actors and their activities, both abroad and a little bit domestically.
Yes. Now, the abroad thing is bad enough on its own, but the domestically is where it really borders on the criminal. I mean, and if not the criminal, at least the predicate for completely shutting down the agency and salting the earth with its remains. I mean, take, for example, how USAID hoodwinked Trump term 1.0. I mean, USAID systematically targeted every single aspect of Trump world during his first term, and I don't think Trump world even knew it. Not just USAID declaring internally, doctrinally, that populism was an attack on democracy, and using that as the basis to try to topple the governments of all of Trump's allies in Europe and in Brazil, the right-wing populist parties and movements, for example, of Marine Le Pen, Nigel Farage, Matteo Salvini, the Vox Party in Spain, the AfD Party in Germany, but also to try to topple Bolsonaro's regime in Brazil, but also targeting Trump himself. USAID has mercenary media for hire. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year paying media outlets to write whirlwind surround sound news cycles to favor the blob's intended political events in the region. So one example of that, a classic, is a real doozy, I should note, is something called the OCCRP, which you can just think of it as the Corruption Reporting Project. It's the largest consortium of investigative journalists in the world, hit piece journalists in the world. USAID paid this group $20 million in 2018, 2019 to write hit piece journalist investigations on the blob's targets in Ukraine. And they dug up dirt on Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign manager, at the height of Russiagate, and tried to insinuate that Paul Manafort was a Russian agent